For each fight on this weekend's upcoming card, including for the prelims, I'm going to be comparing stats, reviewing recent fighter history, analyzing the results of my 7 data science prediction models, and giving a combined weighted prediction based on those models. I'll also provide my final prediction combining both quantitative and qualitative information together. Later this week, I'll upload a video covering promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, and prop bets for y'all to consider, which I'll highlight some great opportunities for you guys. Hopefully you can use these predictions and data to confirm your picks, avoid mistakes, find value bets, or just informative and entertainment purposes to prepare for the lead up to this weekend's event. Please like and subscribe if you find this content interesting, informative, or helpful. It helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you'd like to support the channel through that. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which will give you early access to all of the analysis and results for my videos, as well as additional data analysis and stats. So that includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and a deep dive into each fighter's record history and an analysis through each of their individual historical fights. So you'll get all sorts of stats and data analysis which will help you with your picks and bets. And for 20 bucks a month, which is around $5 per event, you can get all of that information. You can purchase event analysis separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping improve and expand the content of this channel. Running this data and analysis, each of the prediction models, the fight simulations, and updating the site takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate your support. And thank you all for the recent support that you have shown. It truly means the world to me that we can share our passion for MMA and continue to build this community together. The last thing that I want to mention is that there is a BetUS promotion in the description below. If you use that link, it's an affiliate link, so if you set up your account, you'll get a promotional offer with that. I'm excited to continue working on this analysis and content for you all. Thank you guys again for all of your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into the predictions. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with UFC Fight Night Vettori vs. Dolidze 2. This card does have some good matchups, so let's go ahead and start with the breakdowns. First up, we have Yuneisy Duben versus Carli Judice. Now for this fight, I am picking Yuneisy Duben. Now unfortunately, I could not run both of these girls through the prediction models because of the debut here. However, I do want to let you guys know the odds are giving Carli Judice a 78% probability of victory currently. Now I am going the opposite direction here. I think there's a lot of value in this underdog, but let's talk about why. First of all, let's see what we have on paper. The statistical reason why I'm picking Yuneisy Duben, she lands 9.32 more strikes per minute with a 10% higher striking accuracy. Now, one thing I do want to let you guys know about these stats is that they're coming from her one Dana White Contender Series fight, and that was back in September of 2024 against Shannon Clark, in which she won in round 1 with the KO/TKO. Now, Yuneisy, she does have a record of 6 wins and no losses, and out of those 6 wins, 5 of them were KO/TKOs, and 1 of them was a submission, which gives her a 100% finishing rate. Now, she has not lost yet, like I said, but she does have 4 first-round finishes out of her 6 wins. So a lot of the time, she's very aggressive, she's getting it done within the very first round, and I think that that's a very key stat to pay attention to when it comes to this matchup. Now, recently, of course, she's been on a tear. Her most recent win, like I said, September of 2024, she's fought in FFC, Sparta, Inca Fighting Championship, and then a few fights in Sparta as well. Now, let's do an analysis outside of the stats. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages that Yuneisy really has. And that'll work really well for her in this matchup. So the first thing I want to mention, like I said, she does have an aggressive fighting style that works well for her more times than it hasn't. She has this relentless aggression, and she does a lot of striking output. I like the amount of volume she really puts out in her fights, and that will help her in fights. Now, with that, it's not just important to throw a bunch of volume, but what you want to see in a fighter that you're trying to pick is their finishing ability. Now, she has a history of finishing fights quickly, and not only quickly, but within the first round. And I kind of like what I see out of her when it comes to that. It's very rare when it comes to women's MMA, so I appreciate that. She also has very powerful striking, and I think that that's a huge asset of hers. We saw what she did to Shannon Clark. That was a crazy overhand right. Watch the highlights if you can to get a little bit better of a feel as to what her power is like. Now, with that said, you know, she has a lot of momentum. She's making her debut, so I'm sure she's kind of energized, hyped up, trying to make a statement for everybody. So long story short, I think that she's going to get a KO/TKO in this fight as well. So I'm going to take Yuneisy Duben via KO/TKO, and I'm going against the odd makers here. I don't think Vegas quite understands how this matchup's going to play out. And besides, guys, I mean, take a look at Carli Judice here. She looks way too nice to be able to defeat someone like Yuneisy Duben, who's just a killer. Nah, all jokes aside, I am picking Yuneisy Duben. I do expect her to get the KO/TKO, and that is the bottom line prediction for this matchup. For the next fight, we have Evan Elder versus Marquel Mederos. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I think this fight got scrapped, but I'm just going to cover it real quick anyways, just in case it's not, because I couldn't really confirm from a valid source whether it was or wasn't. So I'm just going to roll with the punches here. For this fight, I did end up picking Evan Elder here. I ended up giving him a 65% probability of victory. Now, the prediction models, when I ran both of these guys through, they gave him a 63.8% probability of victory, which is very similar to what I said. I just bumped it up just a little bit based on the things I saw outside of stats. So first, let's talk about those stats. What I like about Evan Elder, he is the younger fighter here by 1 year. He has a reach advantage of 3 inches. He lands 0.63 more strikes per minute, and he has a 4% higher striking accuracy than Marquel does. Now, if you take a look at Evan Elder's total record, the guy's won 9 fights and he's had 2 losses. Let's break those down real quick. Out of his 9 wins, 4 of them were KO/TKOs, 2 were submissions, and 3 were decision victories, which all in all gives the guy a 67% finishing rate. Pretty impressive, right? Out of his 2 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO and 1 was a decision loss. Now, he does have 4 first-round finishes out of his 9 wins, so about half the time, he's getting it done within the very first round. Recently, he's been on a decent tear. He's won 3 of his last 5 fights, so pretty good momentum overall. In fact, he's coming off of 2 straight wins back-to-back into this matchup. His most recent win, just for reference, was back in July of 2024, and his most recent loss was back in February of 2023, so it's been quite a while since he's last lost. And just to summarize, the things that I really like about Evan Elder outside of the stats alone, what I like to see in his fight game, it's the fact that he does have a really good pace and aggression when it comes to his fighting style. He has high volume striking, he really lays that pressure on, and he's good at overwhelming his opponents and kind of just disrupting their rhythm, which again, that's something I really look for when I try to make my picks. And that kind of style, I expect it to force Mederos into a bit of a defensive posture overall, and it's just going to create some openings for Elder that he should be able to capitalize on. At least that's what I'm expecting. Other things that I like about Elder here, he does have good durability overall, and I like his chin as well. Not the way it looks or anything. I didn't mean it like that. I think that he's just a durable fighter, and I appreciate that. And hopefully that doesn't get proven wrong. Anyways, he does have some short notice experience as well. I mean, he's willing to take these fights on short notice. Like his fight against, who was it, Darius Flowers, right? He only had a few days to prepare for that, and he did very well in that fight. In fact, it ended with a round 2 submission victory, and that was on that Namajunas versus Cortez card about halfway through last year. Anyways, I digress. Let's continue talking about other things that are really good about Elder overall. I like his ground game threat. I mean, I know he's primarily a striker, but he does have some submission wins in his career as well, like I just said. He has that arm triangle choke in his most recent fight, and if the fight does end up going to the ground, his grappling skills, they could come into use. You know, he's not one of those guys who's all striking, no grappling, and that's good. A little bit of versatility never hurts. I like the momentum he's bringing into this fight, if it's even happening. If it's not, then I'm sorry for wasting y'all's time. But I'll just cut, long story short here. I'm going with Evan Elder if this fight's happening, and I'm going to take him via decision. I think that's the way to go on this fight. I don't think he gets the finish against Marquel, but I would take him via decision. For the next fight, we have the Ninja Turtle, Josiane Nunes versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Now for this fight, I am going with Nunes here. She's a beast. I'm giving her 67% probability of victory. Now the prediction models, they ended up giving her about a 65% probability of victory. And, that's very close. I bumped it up a little bit because I really like what I see out of Nunes. I think she's a good fighter. Now, statistically, the reason I like Nunes here in this matchup, she's 5 years younger than her opponent here. She also has a 2-inch reach advantage coming into this fight against her. She lands 1.65 more strikes per minute than her opponent. She also absorbs 1.6 less strikes per minute, and that's a really good combination together. And not only that, but to top it off, she has an 8% higher striking defense. Those are all things that I really like to see in a fighter. Now, her total record is 10 wins and 3 losses, so she does pretty good more times than she doesn't. Out of her 10 wins, 7 of them have been finishes. That's a 70% finish rate. The remaining 3 have been decision victories. Now, her 3 losses were all decision losses, so she's not out here getting finished. She does have 3 first-round finishes out of her 10 wins, so most of the time, she is able to take the fight past that first round and still manages to have the power to get a KO/TKO, which is pretty valuable, all things considered. Recently, she's won 3 of her last 5 fights, so she has a good amount of momentum coming into this fight, but when you look at her most recent fights, she's coming off of 2 back-to-back losses into this fight, so that is, full disclosure, a little thing that is a bit of a risk when it comes to picking her in this fight. She does have some most recent negative momentum, right? Her most recent win, for reference, January 2023. It's been a while, but you guys know I like being transparent with you. Her most recent loss was in August of 2024. She has been active. She's trying her best here. Let's talk about the good things that she does and why I think she'll be able to snap that losing streak and step back into the win column. First of all things considered, I like her fight IQ. She's kind of shown her ability to adjust her strategy in mid-fights, and I think that's going to be crucial, especially against someone like Priscilla, who tends to stick to more of this brawling style, kind of regardless of a fight's progression or how a fight's going. That adaptability, it's going to, more times than not, beat someone who's just going in there and trying to brawl. She also, like we saw in the stats, has good striking defense, but that also translates into stylistically. So I know it's numbers on a paper, right? But when you take a look at her previous fights, she does have good striking defense. She knows how to avoid some of these punches and avoid some of those significant damages when it comes to certain exchanges. That defensive edge is very, very crucial in any kind of matchup, but especially against a brawler, right? I also like her volume and precision overall. She lands not only more significant strikes per minute compared to her opponent, but she's good at controlling the pace and just accumulating points. Like, she has a safety net, which is the points that she's accumulating. So even if she's not able to get that round 2 or round 3 finish, oftentimes she is able to get that decision victory from the judges. She does have that reach advantage we talked about, and she knows how to utilize it pretty well. Sometimes MMA fighters, they have a good reach advantage, but they're not the best at utilizing it. She's one of the fighters that does pretty well with it. Also, just her build, she kind of shells up, and she's able to use her reach when she has some openings and opportunities. So let's wrap this one up, guys. Josiane Nunes via decision is the way to go. I don't think she's going to get the finish here, even though she is able to sometimes pull off that second or third round KO/TKO. I just don't see her doing it against someone like Priscilla. Priscilla's pretty tough overall, but I definitely see her racking up those points and just outpointing her overall, just putting on the striking, avoiding a lot of damage, and just getting the unanimous decision victory. So final verdict, Josiane Nunes via decision. For the next fight, we have Daniel Barez versus Andre Lima. Now for this fight, I am going with Andre Lima here. I ended up giving him a 72% probability victory. The prediction models ended up giving him a 70.5% probability victory when you weigh them all together. Now, the statistical reason why I like Andre Lima in this fight: he has a height advantage of an inch here. He's also 10 years younger than Daniel, and he has a reach advantage of an inch as well. Now, along with that, he has a 3% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 2.6 less strikes per minute. He has a 35% higher takedown accuracy, and he lands 0.2 more submissions on average. That's a lot of green on his side that you could see on the screen, and that's exactly what I like to see. Now, it kind of shows, right? Look at his record. 10 wins, no losses. When you take a look at those and break it down, you have 5 wins via KO/TKO and 4 decision victories. All in all, he has a 50% finish rate. He can get the finish. He could also take it to the judges and get the unanimous decision victory. He does pretty well. Now, he does have 4 first-round finishes out of his wins, so that gives him about a 40% first-round finish rate. Recently, of course, he's been on a tear, undefeated. His most recent win back in September of 2024. Let's talk about the good things that we see out of Andre Lima and why I feel pretty confident in picking him. So not only is Andre Lima undefeated, but he's also a young athletic fighter who we've seen rise continuously overall. Not only that, but when it comes to his striking, he's pretty precise as a striker, at least more than his opponent here, Daniel. And so I think that when you have someone like Andre Lima who's a bit more calculated and even efficient in when it comes to landing those clean shots and just minimizing some wasted energy, that's exactly what I like to see in a matchup. And I think that Daniel's going to be a bit vulnerable in this matchup. He's also pretty accurate with his takedowns, so he's versatile. He does have that submission threat in his back pocket as well. And he's kind of a patient fighter. I mean, he fights at this very controlled pace, and he avoids any kind of unnecessary exchanges. And that really just allows him to control a fight. He just dictates that flow. And that kind of frustrates opponents, especially guys like Barez, who kind of relies more on volume when it comes to his fighting game. Now, keep in mind, Andre Lima, he does have a kickboxing background. In fact, he had a 7-0 kickboxing record, and I want you guys to keep that in mind. So his striking foundation it's very, very well-rounded, and I think that will give him it will give him an edge in this stand-up exchange against Daniel. Of course, as he continues in competition, it's going to get harder and harder, and more guys are going to be more talented and versatile. But at least in this matchup, I feel confident in Andre Lima's ability. And of course, his undefeated streak, it definitely has a positive impact on his psychological edge. Not to go too deep into that, but you get what I'm saying. Just to kind of wrap this one up, I am going with Andre Lima via decision. I don't think he gets the finish. I'm not very convinced that he can put away Daniel, but I do believe that he could get that unanimous decision victory, and I do confidently believe Andre Lima will win that fight. For the next fight, we have Carlos Vera versus Josias Musasa. Now for this fight, I am picking Musasa here. Unfortunately, I could not run these guys through the prediction models because of the debut. However, just for you guys to know, the odds are giving Musasa about an 83% probability victory. A lot of confidence in the market for him. Now, the statistical reason why I do like this guy, and I kind of do believe in the confidence, he has a height advantage of 2 inches here. He's 11 years younger than Carlos. He has a reach advantage of 5 inches. And with that, he's able to land 2.53 more strikes per minute. Now, one thing that I do want to let you guys know when it comes to these stats in this comparison is that Musasa, his stats are coming from one specific fight, and that's his Dana White Contender Series fight. This was also back in September of 2024. He won via split decision against Otari Tanzilovi. Hopefully I pronounced that correct. But that was a round 3 split decision, and he ended up winning that fight. So take the stats with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I'll talk about the other advantages as well. First, let's take a look at the guy's record. 8 wins, no losses. Out of those 8 wins, 7 of them have been KO/TKOs. Only 1 was a decision victory. That gives him a very solid 88% finishing rate. He's definitely going into fights with a mission on his mind. He has 6 first-round finishes out of those 8 wins. So a lot of the time, he's able to get it done within that first round. That's very interesting, and keep that in mind, guys. Now, recently, of course, he's been on a tear. His most recent win was back in September of 2024, and he's been pretty active overall. He had like 4 fights in 2024. And then like 2 in 2023, 2 in 2022. It just trickles down, but he stays very, very active, and he's been on a tear. The guys he's previously fought in Impact Championship, Nightmare FC, AKO, and Face Off Fight Night, just for reference. Let's talk about what he does really good. Now, when it comes to Musasa, he's young. You know, he's like 26 years old. Very, very younger than Vera, who's 37, definitely at the late stage of his professional fighting career. And oftentimes we know what that means. It really translates to just better physical conditioning, even faster reflexes. Scientifically, your reflexes slow down as you approach your 40s compared to guys that are approaching their 30s. That's just the way it goes. That's life, right? So important to keep that in mind. He also has really good momentum, so you got to keep in mind that he does have that psychological edge right now. Also, one thing that I really want to highlight for you guys is that he has that southpaw stance, and that's going to pose challenges for Vera, who is orthodox. Southpaws, if you guys don't know, they have an advantage whenever it comes to striking exchanges, and it's because of the angles that they're able to create. Oftentimes what that does is it disrupts their opponent's rhythm, and it really kind of messes up their defense. That's just me summarizing it, but if you look into it, southpaws do have that advantage, and this is something that Musasa does have in this matchup. Now, he does have an aggressive fighting style. I mean, we saw that in the numbers. We saw that in his record. He's very much able to overwhelm his opponents and force them into very defensive positions, and I like to see that. So all in all, I am going for Musasa in this matchup, and I do expect him to get the KO/TKO in this fight. It would not surprise me at all. In fact, even if he gets it within the first round, would not shock me at all. For this next fight, we have Diyar Nurgozhay versus Brendson Ribeiro. Now, for this fight, I am going with Diyar here. Now, unfortunately, for this fight, I could not run both of these guys through the prediction models because of the debut here. However, just for you guys to know, the odds are giving Diyar a 72% probability victory. A lot of confidence in the market for him. Now, the statistical reason why I am picking Diyar, he is 1 year younger than his opponent Brendson here. He also lands 0.36 more strikes per minute with a 10% higher striking accuracy while absorbing 1.22 less strikes per minute, and he has a 12% higher striking defense as well. Now, when it comes to his stats, again, you guys know I like to be transparent with you guys, and I like to keep you guys informed with context, not just give you numbers, but give you context. All of these stats for this guy, they're coming off of one particular fight. And you guessed it, it was his Dana White Contender Series fight, not in September. This one was in October of 2024 against Bartosz Suechik. Man, I mean, I couldn't pronounce that right if my life depended on it. But what he ended up doing, Diyar, he got a second round KO/TKO. Very impressive stuff. Now, so I just wanted to let you guys know to take the stats with a little bit of a grain of salt because it's only one fight. I mean, he couldn't really build up an average, right? So let's switch over to his record. Diyar, he has 10 wins, no losses. He fought a ton at Eagle Fighting Championship, which is, I believe, Khabib's promotion. And he also had a fight over at UAE Warriors. That was back in May of 2024. So let's break down his 10 wins here. He has 6 wins via KO/TKO, 2 via submission, and 2 via decisions, which gives him, all in all, an 80% finish rate. A little bit of diversity in there as well with those 2 submissions. Now, no losses, of course, so nothing to break down there. But he does have 7 first-round finishes out of his 10 wins. So that's a 70% first round finish rate. Very important for this fighter. Keep that in mind. Now, I will say that his most recent one was back in October 2024 in that Dana White Contender Series fight, in which, of course, he got the knockout. Let's talk about what this guy does really well and why I feel pretty good about him in this matchup. Now, not only is this guy undefeated, but he does have pretty good striking precision overall. I mean, he's landing these clean, effective strikes, and I expect that to kind of mess up Ribeiro's game plan a lot. I'm not going to say he's the most technical fighter, but that's just one thing that I kind of noticed. He's also pretty composed in the octagon overall. I mean, he keeps his control in fights. He tries to find proper openings, and that kind of stuff could be crucial, especially when it comes to a debut. I like his takedown defense. He's also kind of adaptable overall. I mean, like I said, he looks to capitalize on opportunities and find a way to secure that first round stoppage. Very aggressive with his game plan. And again, this is someone with that southpaw stance, someone who is able to create angles and some striking opportunities, which do end up more times than not, 70% of the time, being a finish within the very first round. It clearly works for him, and he does well with it. And of course, that being undefeated, making your debut, you have a bit of a psychological confidence coming into this. All in all, just to summarize everything, I'm picking Diyar via KO/TKO. I do expect him to come in here and knock out Brendson Ribeiro. That would not shock me at all. For the next fight, we have Stephanie Luciano versus Sam Hughes. Take a look at Sam Hughes. She looks like she just went through war, guys. I am picking Stephanie Luciano here. I'm giving her a 69.9% probability, which is pretty much 70%, right? The prediction models really like Stephanie. They ended up giving her about a 77% probability victory. I had to knock that down some and just normalize it because Sam, you know, she's tough, and I've seen some good things out of her as well. And I've seen a little bit of vulnerabilities out of Stephanie, so I did have to normalize that because I'm not that confident in her. 77% is a lot. Anyways, statistical reasons why I like Stephanie here. She has a height advantage of an inch. She's 7 years younger. She has a reach advantage of an inch as well. Now with that, she's able to land about 1 more strike per minute than Sam. She also has a 2% better striking accuracy. She also absorbs 2 less strikes per minute on average with a 12% higher striking defense. That is really, that's a great set of striking stats paired together, and she clearly uses that very effectively. Now, not only that, but she has a 70% higher takedown accuracy and a 25% higher takedown defense. Just look at the screen real quick. All of the green, except for one thing, which is takedown averages, all of those are leaning towards Stephanie. So that tells you right off the bat that Stephanie's averages are really good. Let's talk about her record real quick. She has 6 wins and 1 loss. Out of her 6 wins, 2 of them have been KO/TKOs, and 4 have been decision victories. Very common for women's MMA, nothing too extravagant, but not a lot of losses. So she has a 33% finish rate. So more times than not, she's able to control fights, right? Her one single loss was a decision loss, nothing too crazy. Now, recently, if you just take a look at her her career, she has won 3 of her last 5 fights, 1 being a draw, 1 being a loss, in case you guys are curious. She is coming off of a win into this particular fight, which is good. Her most recent win being in August of 2024. She's pretty active now. Her most recent loss was all the way back in January of 2022, so it's been quite a while since she's lost. Let's talk about the good things that Stephanie does and how it can help her against someone like Sam. First of all, her technical striking precision. I mean, she's known for her cleaner, more technical striking, and what that translates to is her ability to land very effective shots while minimizing her damage. You see that in the numbers, but if you take a look at her fights, you see it there too. That completely contrasts with Sam, who just tends to absorb a lot more strikes. She's very aggressive in her style and just less refined overall. Now, Stephanie, what I like about her is that she does have a good fight IQ and some control overall, at least compared to Sam. I'm not saying she's the best fighter out there, but she does have a better fight IQ, in my opinion, my humble opinion, than Sam. She's effectively able to manage the pace when it comes to fights. She keeps that range really, really well. Very strategic overall in just dictating the flow of a fight. Whereas Sam, you know, she's tough. She relies on grit and her toughness rather than tactical adjustments. And in this day and age of MMA and the UFC specifically, it's not all about brute force. As much as, that may sound cool, you do have to have some tactical adjustment ability, some adaptability, some fight IQ, because these guys and these girls are getting better and better and better every single generation. Anyways, I like her takedown defense as well. We saw that in the stats, but she also implements it very well. She's young, keep that in mind. So she has this like physical freshness, less wear and tear, a lot more time to go. She's only 25, so she's really just starting. She has like 10 more years in her professional fighting career. Granted, she doesn't go through any injuries. Anyways, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, I am going with Stephanie here, and surprise, surprise, I'm taking her via decision. I don't think she gets the finish. I think this one is very, very obvious overall. Moving up the card, we have our featured prelim. It's Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Ryan Spann. A very interesting matchup here. I am going for Waldo Cortez Acosta. He has a lot of good momentum on his side, and I ended up giving him a 64% probability of victory. The good thing is that the prediction models have some confluence there as well. They ended up giving him a 58% probability of victory, but I had to bump it up because I like what I see out of Cortez Acosta, and, in contrast to that, I don't like what I'm currently seeing out of Ryan Spann. But first, let's talk statistics, right? Waldo Cortez Acosta, he lands 2.34 more strikes per minute than Ryan. He also has an 8% better striking accuracy while absorbing 0.3 less strikes per minute as well. Not to forget to mention, he has a 9% higher striking defense and a 25% higher takedown accuracy with a 10% higher takedown defense. A lot of green stats leading on the side of Waldo Cortez Acosta. Not only that, but his record looks very good too. 12 wins, only 1 loss. Out of those 12 wins, 5 of them have been KOs/TKOs, only 1 has been a submission, and the remaining 6 have been decision victories, which gives him a perfectly split 50% finish rate. So he's able to get points from the judges. He's also able to finish fights, just depends on what's going on. His only loss was a decision loss. He does have 3 first-round finishes out of his 12 wins, so that's pretty interesting. He doesn't really get the first round finish frequently, but he can sometimes. Recently, he's been on an absolute tear. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, and specifically, his streak is a 3-fight win streak coming into this fight. We saw him beat Lucas Bresky, that was back in 2023. Then we saw that Andre Arlovsky fight in 2024, and most recently, Robelis de Spain. And so he's won all of those. He's got a couple unanimous decision victories and a KO/TKO most recently. His most recent win, again, May of 2024, most recent loss all the way back in April of 2023. That was to Marcos Rogerio de Lima. And before then, the guy was undefeated. So Waldo Cortez Acosta, an absolute beast in terms of what's on paper. But let's talk about what's going for him in terms of stylistic advantages. First things first, his durability and pace control. I mean, he's shown us his ability to absorb damage and continue to maintain a slow and controlled pace. What that does, again, we've talked about this multiple times, it frustrates fighters such as someone like Ryan Spann, who kind of relies on quick finishes and may struggle in some of those prolonged fights, right? And keep in mind, Cortez Acosta, he does have that heavyweight experience. He's fought in this division, and he developed those like necessary skills and even the durability and power that we see in a lot of heavyweights. Now, Spann, on the other hand, he's just making his heavyweight debut, and I don't think he's going to be as comfortable as Acosta has been. He has more experience in that regard. Other things I want to mention is just his consistency overall. I mean, not only on paper, but the guy has just demonstrated a steady and reliable performance pattern, and that's exactly what I like to see in my picks. Spann, if you look at his record, the guy's been very inconsistent. He lost quite a few fights, and he just recently snapped that, but it's not very convincing. There's just too much going on in his record, and he's just inconsistent as a fighter. And now with him moving up to heavyweight, I just don't really know what to expect out of the guy. So I think the safer, logical pick would be Waldo Cortez Acosta. Not only that, but I do like Acosta's like fight IQ and just his strategy. He's shown some adaptability. He's even done some taunts and stuff like that, which, just messes with your opponent's psychology, and then he's able to like do things like employ takedowns whenever he's able to, and that kind of adaptability and just versatility, it's going to be pretty crucial against someone like Spann, who Spann's a little bit predictable. I mean, I wouldn't fight him personally, but the guy is pretty predictable, all things considered. So just to wrap this one up, I'm leaning towards Waldo Cortez Acosta, and I would take him via decision. I don't see him finishing Spann, full transparency. I do think he's going to get the decision victory. For the next fight, I'm actually very interested for this fight. It's Suyoung You versus AJ Cunningham. Now for this fight, I am picking Suyoung You, and I did give him a confident 76% probability of victory. Now the prediction models agreed with me. They did their whole analysis, and when I weigh those averages together, based on accuracy of these different models, I'm getting a 69% probability of victory read for Suyoung You. And I feel pretty confident, so I bumped that up actually. But first, let's talk about statistics here. So Suyoung You, he's a year younger than AJ. He has a 13% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 10 less strikes per minute. He has a 24% better striking defense and a 33% higher takedown defense. Those are pretty solid stats, and you could see a whole bunch of green on Suyoung Yu's side, and that never hurts to see that, right? Now let's talk about his record. 14 wins and only 3 losses. AJ Cunningham, 11 wins and 4 losses. Let's break down the wins of Suyoung You. 3 of those victories were KO/TKOs. 5 have been submissions, and 6 were decision victories. Pretty balanced across the board, but he does have a 57% finish rate, which is pretty decent. Out of his 3 losses, let's break those down. 1 of those was a KO/TKO, and 2 were decision losses. Now, he does have 5 first-round finishes out of his 14 wins, so about a third of the time, he can get it done within that first round. Recently, he's done pretty well. 3 of his last 5 fights have been wins. In fact, he's been on a 3-fight win streak, so that's great momentum coming into this fight. His most recent win, November of 2024. Most recent loss, December of 2023. Let's talk about the good things that Suyoung You has. I really like, and a lot of people might not talk about this, but I really like his grappling skills. If you take a look at his record, he has really good submission victories, especially from the middle to early stage of his professional fighting career. So what I mean is, we see on his record that he has an arm triangle submission victory, an arm bar submission victory, and 3 rear naked choke submission victories. The guy is clearly good at grappling. Now recently he hasn't really employed a lot of that in terms of submissions, but he does do a good amount of grappling, and he is pretty good at that and skilled. So I want to point that out. It's a huge advantage, especially against someone like AJ Cunningham, who I wouldn't say is, really good at defending those. Also, I like Suyoung Yu's cardio and his pace that he maintains throughout fights. I think that kind of stuff obviously wears your opponent down, and that's going to work in his favor. I also like his striking defense. I mean, he seems to be a really difficult opponent to hit. I mean, a lot of people have struggled just pouring it on him and landing some of those shots. It's not very easy against someone who has good striking defense. And he does have experience in longer fights too. I mean, we talked about how a lot of his victories did come through decision as well, not only finishes, but those decisions. And so, he has a pretty high average fight time if you take a look at his stats in terms of fight time. And so AJ Cunningham, on the other hand, he doesn't have as much fight time when it comes to each of his fights, and you take a look at his average time period for each of his fights. And so that kind of stuff, it just gives someone more confidence that, hey, if this fight goes deeper into the later rounds, I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to be able to wear this guy down. So that's what Suyoung You brings. Like I said, he has that submission threat. He's mentally tough. He's prepared. Great amount of momentum. He has that psychological edge. Good control within the octagon. He's able to dictate that pace and the positioning of fights, which a lot of fighters, I see them struggling very much. In fact, we just saw that last week. Alex Pereira was struggling a little bit in terms of his positioning in the fight. And that's really one of the key factors that led to his loss. Not to deviate from this fight, but you get what I'm saying. Suyoung You, I think he's good at that. All things considered, just to wrap this one up, I'm going to say Suyoung You via decision. I don't see him getting the finish here, honestly, against AJ Cunningham, but I do see him controlling a lot of this fight, whether it's standing up or with the grappling, the clinch, takedowns. I just see a lot of control leaning towards Suyoung Yu's favor. For the next fight, we have Damon Blackshear versus Cody Gibson. This should be an interesting fight as well. I'm picking Damon Blackshear here, and I'm giving him a pretty confident 75% probability of victory. Now, the prediction models generally agree. They gave him a 73.6% probability of victory. I just had to bump that up just a little bit based on everything I researched outside of stats. But first, let's talk about those stats. When it comes to Damon Blackshear, he is 7 years younger than Cody. He also has a reach advantage of 1 inch, and with that, he's able to land 0.83 more strikes per minute on average than Cody, and he has a 3% better striking accuracy. Not only that, but in terms of the ground game, he lands 0.7 more submissions on average. Let's take a look at his record real quick. 14 wins, 7 losses. Not the best record, but let's just break it down. Out of those wins, 2 of them were KO/TKOs, 9 were submission victories, and 3 were decision victories, which still gives him a 73% finish rate with only 2 KO/TKOs. It's those submissions that are really deadly. Out of his 7 losses, 1 of them was a KO/TKO, and the remaining 6 were decision losses. Now, Damon, he has 3 first-round finishes, so he doesn't necessarily get the finish in the very first round, but he's able to find it more times than not in the second and third. Now, recently, he's won 3 of his last 5 fights. He's doing pretty good, and he is coming off of a win into this particular fight. Now, his most recent win was just back in November of 2024, a few months ago, and his most recent loss was a few months before that in July of 2024. He's been pretty active. Let's talk about the good things leaning towards Damon's favor here. Now, one thing I really like about him is his ability to switch stances. I mean, this guy, he's kind of hard to read, right? He has a lot of striking versatility with that stance switch, and that just allows him to create, unexpected angles and stuff like that and kind of confuse your opponent. Now, Cody Gibson, he's an orthodox fighter, and so that can definitely disrupt your rhythm and any kind of defensive strategy that you're trying to employ against a fighter. It just makes you unpredictable. Now, another thing that Damon has here is his submission threat. He has a pretty good submission average, and he's pretty proficient with his submissions. Let's take a look at his record real quick and his history. So he's had submissions sprinkled throughout his professional fighting career. Literally, his most recent fight to his very first fight in 2016, both of those were submissions. Now, the kind of submissions this guy has done, rear naked chokes, guillotines, arm triangles, and also the triangle choke. And so this guy is very well versed when it comes to submissions, and I think that's going to definitely be a huge advantage here. I also like the pace and pressure he puts on. I mean, he's known for that high pace and just applying that relentless grappling pressure, and that for sure wears your opponents down over time and definitely does a number on your cardio and their endurance over the span of the fight. He's also very athletic, and he has a lot of speed to him. I mean, clearly you could tell in the picture the guy is ripped, right? But he's also athletic, and you don't necessarily have to be ripped to be athletic. You could be, skinny, lean, and still athletic. But my point is, he is freakishly athletic, and that kind of stuff definitely pours into his game plan and helps him execute properly. He does have good momentum, like I said. He's young. I mean, he's only 30 years old. He's still kind of in his prime or just entering his prime. At least that's how MMA works. He has quite a while still. I mean, he could go up until 36, 37. Keep in mind, Cody Gibson is 37, definitely at the late stage of his professional fighting career, and I think you do have to keep that in mind. Now, Blackshear, another thing I want to mention, he's really good at whenever it comes to scrambling. He's able to recover from some really awkward and unfavorable positions, and from that, he creates these opportunities for submissions or reversals. I like that. And so, all in all, just to kind of summarize, I'm going to take Damon Blackshear via decision. I don't think he gets the submission here, although if he does, it wouldn't completely shock me. But I see him more so getting that decision victory and just controlling and grappling the heck out of Cody Gibson. For the next fight, we have Alexander Hernandez versus Kurt Holobaugh. Also a pretty decent fight. Now, for this fight, I am picking Alexander Hernandez. I'm giving him a 67% probability of victory. Now, the prediction models, they gave him a 65% probability of victory, but generally, obviously, they agree. I just had to bump it up a little bit because I like what I see out of Alexander Hernandez. So let's talk about his statistical advantages. First of all, he's 6 years younger than Kurt. Right off the bat, Kurt is 38 years old, respectfully. Alexander is 32. That's going to have an impact on this fight, whether, whatever we want to feel about it, it does have an impact on fighters, more times than it doesn't, at least. Now, other things that are really going in his favor in terms of the stats. He has a reach advantage of 2 inches. Now, with that, he also has a 10% better striking defense, and he also lands 0.19 more takedowns on average with a 29% higher takedown defense. When you look at the statistical advantages here, they're kind of sprinkled left and right, but Alexander Hernandez has some important key stats that he's winning in. Let's take a look at Alex's his record. 15 wins, 8 losses. Not the best record, but we're going to roll with it. Out of his 15 wins, 6 of them have been KO/TKOs. 2 of them were submissions and 7 were decision victories, which all in all gives him a 53% finish rate. Not the biggest finisher on the planet. Now, out of his 8 losses, 3 of them were KO/TKOs. 1 was a submission loss, and the remaining 4 were decision losses. Not exactly what I want to see out of the pick, but out of these 2, I think Alexander Hernandez is the better of these 2. Now, he does have 7 first-round finishes out of his 15 wins, and so at least half the time, if he is going to get the finish, he does get it in the first round. Let's take a look at his momentum recently. He's only won 2 of his last 5 fights, but, to kind of play devil's advocate and soften that low momentum, he is coming off of a win into this fight, and maybe that's going to carry over some positive momentum. Maybe, maybe not. His most recent win, October of 2024. Most recent loss was a few months before that, back in April of 2024. He is active. We see him a lot on those fight nights and stuff. So let's talk about those stylistic advantages that Alexander has coming into this fight. I do like his strategy overall when it comes to fights. He is a pretty tactical fighter. It doesn't always work for him, but he is tactical. I mean, he sets the tempo pretty early, continues to manage that distance along fights, and he kind of adapts throughout the fights. And so he makes these tiny adjustments where when they do work for him, they really work for him. And so I do expect him to control this fight's pace a little bit, especially with the advantages that he brings to the table. Now, I also like his defense. I mean, he has pretty good striking defense and takedown defense when it comes to fights, when you look at his previous fights. And really what he's good at is just avoiding and mitigating that damage whenever he's being controlled. He also has good experience against some of the, more experienced, higher level fighters. Like you have Beneil Dariush, you have Oliver Aubin Mercier, and then you also have guys like Donald Cerrone that he's fought against. And so that kind of stuff, it does help you learn and improve when you are facing guys that are generally considered at a higher place than you are in terms of experience and skill. He is good in terms of agility and movement. I mean, I like his physical athleticism overall, and I think that what he does really well in his fights, he moves in and out of range very quickly, and I think that that can disrupt Halabaw's rhythm in this fight. Other things that I really like, it's just his resilience. He's one of those fighters that even though they go through some setbacks, he just shows resilience, bounces back. Even if he's facing some losses, he gets right back in there, and then he just proves people wrong, and he's able to get some wins racked in. And so that kind of, whereas some guys, my point is this, some guys, they get some losses, and all of a sudden, it's downhill, right? Alexander Hernandez, he's able to kind of stay in the game. So all things considered, just to kind of wrap this one up for you guys, I'm going to take Alexander Hernandez via decision. I feel pretty confident about it overall. Again, 67% probability, which is pretty strong, all things considered. For the next fight, we have Seong Woo Choi versus Kevin Vallejos. Now, for this fight, I am picking Kevin. Unfortunately, I could not run both of these guys through my prediction models because of the debut here. However, the odds are giving Kevin an 80% probability of victory. Very, very solid. Now, the statistical benefits, or not benefits, but advantages that he has in this matchup. He's 9 years younger than Seong Woo Choi. Now, Seong Woo Choi is not very old, to be fair. He's 32, and that's usually, around your prime of your MMA career, give or take. It might be a little bit after, but you get my point. Kevin, though, he's 23. I mean, the world's his oyster, right? This kid is young. He lands 3.34 more strikes per minute, has a 12% higher striking accuracy, and a 9% higher striking defense. I would take those stats with a grain of salt, though, because that's only across the Dana White Contender Series fight, which was back in September 2024 against Cam Teague, where Kevin had won in the first round via KO/TKO. Now, this guy, a year ago, from that point, in September of 2023, he was actually on Dana White's Contender Series. That was Season 7. And that's where he fought Gene Silva, and he actually lost. That was a unanimous decision loss to Gene Silva. So an important thing to keep in mind, just some context, don't take his stats a little bit too seriously, but I do want to share it with you guys because that's part of my research. Let's take a look at Kevin's total record, right? Let's zoom out. 14 wins and 1 loss. Let's break that down. 14 wins, 10 of those 14 wins were KO/TKOs. This guy has some power in his hands. 2 of those were submissions, so he does have some skills in that submission game as well, and the remaining 2 were decision victories, which gives him a very respectable 86% finish rate already. Now, out of his 1 loss, that was a decision loss. He does have 7 first-round finishes, so what that means is about half the time that this guy finishes his fights, it's within the very first round, but he's still able to get a ton of finishes in the second or third. So this guy is dangerous across the board. Now, recently he's been on a tear. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights. In fact, he's coming off of 3 wins in a row after that loss to Gene Silva, which in fact is his only loss, which is insane. He's fought a lot of championship fights when it came to the Samurai Fight House promotion. In fact, he's been in how many? This is 6 or 7 Samurai Fight House championship fights in which he's won all of those. A lot of those were KO/TKOs. He even has 2 rear naked chokes in his record as well. Very impressive stuff overall. I mean, this guy, he has a bright future ahead of him as long as he stays healthy. Most recent win was back in September 2024, like I said, and his most recent loss, like we covered, Gene Silva back in September 2023. Let's talk about what this guy does very, very well. First thing I want to mention, his switch stance. I mean, he's able to adapt very quickly when it comes to fights, and he's switching constantly when it comes to his stance. Now, Choi, he has that orthodox stance, very very predictable. And so Choi's going to go through a lot of unpredictability when it comes to a guy like Kevin. Kevin's going to be setting up those angles and those striking opportunities, trying to find that KO/TKO, which he does very, very well. Not only that, but this kid, he has really good power and aggression as well. He has that one punch knockout power. We saw that in that Dana White Contender Series fight against Cam T. And I think that is going to not only overwhelm Choi, but kind of scare him a little bit too, because you're going to be a bit cautious. Not to continue mentioning the Alex Pereira versus Ankalaev fight, but what we saw was kind of a hesitant Pereira, actually. We saw a hesitant Pereira once he saw the striking being poured on him a bit from Ankalaev. And early in the fight, funny enough, we saw a hesitating Ankalaev because of the striking and the power that Alex brings. So no matter what you believe, this stuff has a huge impact on people's psychology when it comes to being in the octagon. Sometimes you're a little bit panicked when you're facing a guy who has demonstrated a ton of power and aggression in his record, and he's just known for that. And so he's going to be very reserved, and it's just not going to go well. I don't see a lot of paths to victory for Choi. Anyways, not to go off on a tangent, but let's continue. I also like this kid's fight IQ and his adaptability overall. He has a lot of momentum coming in this fight, and he has grappling potential too. Again, we covered a little bit on his 2 submissions that he has on his record. He does have some skill set when it comes to the ground game. He's not just a striker, so keep that in mind. He's also very fast and precise with his strikes, very accurate, and I like to see that. And he has some experience against some good competition as well. Just because he lost to Gene Silva, who's a great fighter, by the way, it does not mean that Kevin's a bad fighter. If anything, Kevin probably came out of that and learned a lot, and got a taste of facing someone more experienced. And these are all really good things, especially being so young. He's 23 years old, guys. All in all, just to wrap this one up, I'm taking Kevin via KO/TKO. I think we're going to see a star up and coming. Hopefully the kid doesn't get fraud checked, because that would be embarrassing. But we'll see how it goes. I'm expecting Kevin to do really good this weekend. For the next fight, we have an interesting fight with Chidi Njokuani versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. For this fight, I am picking dos Santos, and I'm giving him a 67% probability victory. Now, the prediction models, they also generally agree. They give him a 65% probability victory, just about. Now, the statistical advantage that Zaleski dos Santos has is that he lands 0.3 more submissions on average. A lot of the other statistical advantages on paper are actually towards Chidi Njokuani, so kind of important to keep that in mind. But let's talk about the guy's record, and I think that's pretty important to break down. He has 25 wins, 8 losses, and out of those 25 wins, 15 of those were KO/TKOs, 3 submissions, and 7 decision victories, which is versatile, but it also gives him a 72% finish rate. Out of his 8 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO, 2 were submission losses, 5 were decision losses. He does have 11 first-round finishes out of his 25 wins, pretty important. Recently, he's been on a tear. 3 of his last 5 fights, he's won. In fact, he's coming off of a win into this specific fight. That fight was a victory back in November of 2024, and the most recent time he lost was a few months before that, back in June of 2024. Let's talk about the good things that dos Santos does, and kind of just get off of the paper side of statistics and look at the stylistic advantages he has. First of all, dos Santos, he has good experience when it comes to higher stake fights. I mean, he's had wins over Sean Strickland, Benoit Saint Denis, and Abubakar Nurmagomedov. And so those kind of high pressure fights, that's going to give him an edge when it comes to just understanding crucial fight dynamics and having that experience in the octagon. And regardless of how he performed in some of those fights, like he had a split decision victory over Abubakar, so regardless of how it went, it's just good experience, and so that's my point, right? He also has a couple championship fight experiences, but that was back in Jungle Fight, and that was back in 2014. So the guy's been fighting for a while. In fact, his first fight was all the way back in 2009. So this guy, he's definitely been around. He's 38, very experienced. He's fought some really good guys. He got that unanimous decision victory against Benoit Saint Denis. This was back in 2021 when Benoit was, on the rise. Before that, he fought Muslim Salikov. Some really good names across the board, right? Now, let's talk about other good stylistic things. He's very versatile in his fight game. He's known as, that capoeira style. And so he has these dynamic, very cool movements, fun to watch, unpredictable angles when it comes to his striking. I would hate to be this guy's opponent because anticipating an attack from him is going to be tough. You see him going towards the ground and doing a spin. You don't know if that spin is going to land in your liver, in your ribs, or on your face, or even on your legs. You have no idea, right? And that's just the beauty of capoeira. It's a very fun style of fighting to watch. And the guys performing capoeira, they look like they're having a blast too, if I'm being honest. But anyways, I think that just adds complexity to his game, and I don't think that Chidi Jokwani has what it takes to handle that. Now, another good thing I like about Dos Santos is his clinch and his ground game. I think that kind of stuff is going to neutralize any kind of striking advantage that you could make an argument that Jokwani has. I think that gets a bit neutralized when you take a look at Dos Santos's his skill set when it comes to the ground game. So just to kind of wrap this one up, I am picking Elizeu Zaleski Dos Santos, and I think he's going to win via decision. I don't think we're going to get like a knockout or anything just because of Chidi's style and his skill set, so I don't expect to see that. I do expect it to go to the judges and him to get a decision victory. So, and that's with about a 67% confidence. Also pretty confident in Dos Santos here. For the next fight, we have a heated fight between these two. We have Marvin Vettori versus Roman Dolidze, our main event of the evening. For this fight, I am actually going for Marvin Vettori here. I'm giving him a 60% probability victory. That's not extremely confident, but I do expect him to win. Now, prediction models, they gave him more confident reading. They gave him a 64% probability of victory. I had to bump that down a little bit just based on Roman Dolidze's skill set and his style. I'll talk about that in a second, but one thing that I want to mention to you guys is this is a rematch between these two guys. They've actually fought against each other previously. That was on UFC 286 back in March of 2023. And so just to kind of summarize what happened in that fight, Dolidze had started off strong. He landed some heavy strikes in that first round, and Vettori then in the next few rounds, he used his wrestling and his control, and then he was able to effectively neutralize some of Dolidze's offense. Now, despite Dolidze having that early aggression, the judges ended up giving Vettori a completely unanimous decision, 29-28, 29-28, and then a 30-27. And so that decision was a bit controversial because some people felt that Dolidze had done enough to win, and Vettori, you know, he had his leg kicks and that constant pressure. And I think ultimately that's what the judges really liked in that fight. I'm not saying who should have won and all that stuff. I just want to give you guys a quick recap and give you some context into their first fight. The statistical reason why I like Marvin Vettori in this fight. First of all, he's 5 years younger than Roman, who is 36 years old. Marvin is 31. And Marvin also lands 1.4 more strikes per minute. He has a 3% higher striking accuracy, a 7% higher striking defense, and he lands 0.33 more takedowns on average with a 3% higher takedown accuracy and a 36% higher takedown defense. Really good stats leaning towards Marvin. You see a lot of green on his side of the screen, right? Now, let's take a look at his record. 19 wins and 7 losses. Not the greatest record, especially most recently, but still a good record overall. Let's break down those wins. 2 of those were KO/TKO victories, 9 were submission victories, and 8 were decision victories. That gives him a 58% finish rate. His game is not knocking people out. His game is really just grappling and grinding out victories, getting points, and laying the hurt on his opponents. Now, out of his 7 losses, all 7 of those were decision losses, so he's not out here getting finished. He does have 11 first-round finishes out of his 19 wins, and so he might not knock out a guy in the very first round, but more times than not, at like maybe 60% of the time, what this guy is doing is he's able to get a submission finish in the first round. That's a key stat. Keep that in mind. Recently, like I said, he's not doing too well. He's only won 2 of his last 5 fights. In fact, he's coming off of a loss into this specific fight, but I can still make a case as to why I think Vettori is going to win this. First, let's look at his most recent win. His most recent win was actually back in March of 2023. That's not very convincing. His most recent loss was back in June of 2023, so he hasn't been very active either. Let's talk about the stylistic things and why in this matchup specifically I like Marvin versus Roman. First of all, Marvin, let's talk about his granite chin here. I mean, he's able to absorb some heavy strikes without being knocked out. And I mean, that's why they call him the Italian granite chin, right? Now, that kind of durability, it's very clear. It allows him to stay in fights much longer than average, and it also allows him to wear down his opponents over time. I would hate to be facing this guy because it would almost feel like none of my shots are having an impact on him, and I just can't drop him no matter how hard I hit him, right? He does have experience in very high-stake fights. Don't think that Vettori, just because he hasn't been the most active, that he hasn't fought some of the top guys in his division. We've seen him fight guys like Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, and even if he's losing certain fights, that is really good key experience because you come off of that not only just being confident that, hey, I did fight someone with high experience, so the next time I do, I already know how that's going to feel. It's going to be very familiar, but it's also, so what I mean is it's going to get you used to those high pressure situations, right? but it's also good experience in general because you learn from your mistakes and you can grow. You can rewatch that footage, and then mentally you could reimagine how you were in that moment of the fight and what you should have done. And that kind of mental tweaking and mental meditation, and just that review process, it's very, very important for fighters. The fighters that I've heard in interviews that do this are generally more successful than the guys who don't talk about this kind of stuff. Anyways, Vettori, he's really good with that relentless forward pressure. I mean, he's known for that aggressive forward moving style, which I like to watch. And he's very good at overwhelming opponents. He's putting that constant pressure on them. And what that does is it forces his opponents to fight very defensively, and it limits their opportunities to counter. And that's going to be really tough for Dolidze. Now, another thing that you can't do against Vettori, it's very hard to take him down. I mean, he has really good takedown defense, and that's very specific, very crucial in this particular matchup. Dolidze is a very crafty grappler. He's known for that. So the ability to keep the fight standing, and if Vettori is able to do that, which statistics and his style shows that he should be, that's going to help him continue striking more effectively and prevent Dolidze from employing his advantage. Other things I like Vettori's cardio and his endurance overall. I mean, he's maintained very high paces throughout fights. Sometimes he gets a little bit tired, but more times than not, he does very good, and he can oftentimes capitalize on his opponent's fatigue, and that's important. He's also a very mentally tough fighter. A lot of that comes from his skill, but also a lot of that just comes from his ego and his brute aggression. The guy's Italian. I mean, what do you expect, right? He does have some moments in his fighting career that I've seen where he does some strategic adaptability, and so I like that. You know, if you are able to adjust mid-fight and exploit some of your opponent's weaknesses that you're able to read early on in the fight. So all things considered, I do expect Marvin Vettori to get the decision victory over Roman Dolidze. I do expect him to win this match again, and hopefully it's not going to be controversial and we get a clear-cut winner to where people aren't debating. I think this card's going to be pretty interesting in terms of some of these stylistic matchups and some of these new prospects that are up and coming in the UFC. It should be fun, all things considered, coming off of UFC Alex Pereira versus Ankalaev. Should be an interesting fight night. I wish it wasn't at the Apex Center, but it is what it is. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. It's good to be back. I'm going to continue posting now. Patreon's always there. I'm constantly putting things out on the Patreon week after week for each event. I've never missed a single event. So in case I'm not able to post a video, feel free to check out the Patreon and go from there. I also post things on the website, but that's usually the day or the morning of the fight, or even a couple hours right before the fight, just so I can share some of those readings and stats and model results and some of those bets last minute with you guys. But if you want all that stuff a week earlier, check out the Patreon. Thank you guys once again so much. Happy to be here. Happy to share all my research with you guys. Hope you guys enjoy this weekend and have a good rest of your week as well. And now let's get to the conclusion. And with that, those are all of the fights for this weekend's event. I hope you all enjoyed the analysis and that your bets hit. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe, as it'll help keep me motivated in creating these videos. Running this data, analysis, prediction models, and creating charts and graphs takes hours every day and week, so your support is always appreciated. Please also check out my Patreon if you'd like to support me through there. There's a $10 a month contribution option and a premium $20 a month option, which comes with early access to all of the analysis from this video, as well as promising underdogs, favorites, prop bets, and all of the extra data analysis and stats as well. This analysis, information, and these stats will help you with your bets, and it'll help support my efforts to continue providing and expanding content for you all. So please check out that Patreon if you want to show me some love and help me out there. Thank you all once again for watching, and as always, see you guys in the next one.